Hello, everybody. All right, this is Chloe. Thank you for taking a peek at this later. If nobody joins me now, it's all good. I am really enjoying working on my site I've been working on through my phone as a oracle reader, and I've had some growth. And some of the things that have changed is I was able to get the Oceanic Tarot, and I had a realization in the last week with doing readings and some other things that had happened that I needed a good tarot that I didn't find too distracting, with certain symbolism and cards that I tend to have a little bit of issue with in the tarot system. Now, don't get me wrong on a couple of points here. I am not bashing tarot. I am not bashing the Christian faith. I am not bashing Michele's, the original tarot systems that came before Wider Waite and Thoth and all those other type of things. I am just sharing my kind of growth in what I'm trying to do with working with divination tools, particularly tarot. And I've been kind of favoring oracles for a long time. And through this last year, since I started this YouTube channel, I have been trying to redevelop a healthy relationship with tarot, because tarot is where I started. And when it came to divination decks and exploring my intuitive nature as a sensitive in general. But I really got comfortable with oracles because I could choose oracles and that were effective, beautiful, and spoke to my soul, that did not have some of the symbolic imagery and cultural message and guidelines, so to speak, on life that you find in, say, tarot, which comes from like the Italian Renaissance that was dominated by the Italian or Catholic Church, however you want to think of it. It wasn't just the Italian Church, it was the Catholic Church. And that had been woven, some of that symbolism had been woven into the original tarot systems, like the Marcellus. And I know there's a couple variants of that, like a German system and a French system and a couple of different things. But I got to be honest, as much as I am opening myself up to, as I put in the title and some info for this stream, I'm opening myself up to Pip Decks, but more modern takes on Pip Decks. I'm not trying to go back to the Marcellus form, because there's two, from what I've been able to read, and I've been watching some videos of those of you who are so generous in sharing your love for this style, which I would say is probably the great grandparent of tarot, to all tarot, that I think it's wonderful. But I have so many triggers based off of my own way I was raised and the spiritual different paths I had to grow and decide if I was going to stick to them or if I need to explore something new, and if I have triggers and all this different stuff. I've grown a lot, but I've also realized that I still have certain triggers. And I mean, as a mother, I'm trying to teach my sons to respect different religions, whether they're our own or not. And I know that as a reader, I need to be able to read with many different styles of symbolism. But as a person with sensory, not just sensory sensitivity that can help people kind of make choices and explore themselves, but also sensory input that can trigger reactions, I need to be careful for my own self how much of that I take into my life, how much of it brings flashbacks of negative situations that I had been through, and what I feel comfortable using. So I had been, on a side note, I had been looking for a, like really, oh my gosh, it's probably been like 4 years now, maybe 4 for sure. I'm going to say 3 at the least, 5 at the most, 4 in the middle, that I've been looking for a tarot mermaid style deck that I felt I could use. And the reason why I want this is because I have always been very connected to moving water, what I call living water, and just water sources. It can be hot springs, it can be the ocean, it can be a bay, it can be rivers and creeks and natural places. I find them cleansing, refreshing. They help me feel more mentally balanced when I get to spend a bit of time in there. When there is, like today, my apps are saying, oh, it's just going to be cloudy. And I opened my window because I noticed it was cooler outside than in the house. And I wanted some fresh air because for me, I have dust allergies. And when I open the window, it helps bring in, fresh air and stuff. And then I was very sure it was sprinkling or misting outside, but I didn't directly go over, and I looked at my app and it said, nope, just cloudy. And then I happened to go and I was cleaning up after the cats and gathering toys and different things. And I was close enough to the window to go, no, I smell water. And I was right. I had heard droplets. And no, it's raining. It's definitely raining, but it's more like mist. It's very, very fine. The temperature is very nice, almost a little chill for me. I am a little bit sensitive right now. I'm probably TMI, but I'm getting a bit close to my time of the month, and my body tends to be more sensitive than ever around this time. But that also means I'm very sensitive in readings as well. So I take it as a negative plus because it increases my sensitivity in general. So this last week, I've been doing readings, and I've been using my Myth and Mermaids Oracle. And it has been reading the yes-no system on it is been reading fantastically. And then I had been taking in as much as I can the emotions and the intuitive readings off the people. And I know I'm getting long story short here, but I ended up, after getting this deck and doing some research, trying to figure out how I want to try to figure out how to use this, I found that they work really well together in kind of checking each other and helping me make sure I'm reading my clients' energies correctly, especially when they give me very limited info. That's very annoying. But, we should be able to read them anyways, right? In this case, on the system that I'm working on, they're supposed to be able to share a picture or a video with me, plus questions, and then whatever kind of description or additional info they want to share. So they don't actually have to share a lot of info, but because this is a distance reading, a little bit more details, not even a lot, just like if you are or not already in a relationship. If like this one woman wrote a question kind of vaguely, or was talking about one person and then added somebody else's name at the end in a totally different question. But the way she wrote it made it sound like she might have been talking about the same person. So I had to clarify that with her in the comment section of the program. So then I was able to do the reading, and it was fine. But the cards, the Myth and Mermaids Oracle of Water, have been working fantastic on reading for that site. Most of the readings I do on that site are relationship based, parent, children, romantic relationship, love, family type stuff. It's been a lot of that lately, only a few more career type stuff. So I've been using the Myth and Mermaids Jessamine Beckett Griffith deck mostly. And then I was trying to work with a couple of the other ones, but I just wasn't feeling with it. And I said, okay, well, I've gotten a little time in with the Oceanic Tarot, and let me set this up because I don't want to do a full walkthrough. This deck's been out since about 2016. I got to say, I actually really like this box. It came with it. It's very sturdy. You actually know when you have it on correctly because part of the picture on the bottom flows and on this side flows with the front. So you know if you have this on correctly or not. I mean, you can totally put it on differently, but there was enough pictures on it to give me an idea of what I was getting. And I had already seen part of one or two videos that this was a pip deck. And I had this hesitant to read with pip decks. Now I have it in a cloth bag in here because this thing, after you take the sleeve, it's useless. It's like, throw it away, gone. Oh, sorry, baby good boy. I didn't mean to get you with that. It's like, don't even, just take it out. You're going to accidentally bend your cards or something if you try to put them in there with that. And now without that piece, the book and my cloth, it's like a sateen or silk bag, fits perfectly in here. So it's wonderful. I picked this one over the Tarot of the Mermaids because basically, I have stated a few times before that I do not like boobalicious mermaids. I think they're gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. The artwork is fantastic. I have an Oracle one as well. Oracle the Mermaids by Lucy Cavendish. And I think that's Selena Finnick. Absolutely gloriously beautiful, sensual deck. But in some cases, this is a little boobalicious. And yeah. I wanted a different feel, basically. And I love that deck. I do use it, but I've been finding that the kind of sassy, direct messaging of the Myth and Mermaids has been working with me more on that site. I think it's meshing with the clients better. I'm going to start trying the other one occasionally, but for now, this works. All right. So I really love also the backs on these. I know they've updated the backs of the Tarot of the Mermaids. Or is it Mermaids Tarot? I can't remember. Whatever that one is, the other one that's been out forever, they finally changed the backings, so they're a lot nicer than just like one of the cards from the deck being kind of mirrored on there and then the weird borders they used to do. I have the Pagan Tarot, and it did the same thing in a green, white, cream look, where it was like a picture from the deck, some kind of mirroring effect on the edge. It was like, yeah. It's a good deck, but I've never liked the backs. So what I did was I kind of sorted the deck out on key points. I think there's about 5 key points that I wanted to bring up about this deck and why I decided that I was going to make the effort to study Pip style reading and try and work with a Pip deck instead of wider weight for a bit. I mean, I'm still going to have them. I'm going to use them if I feel pulled towards my other deck, but I've been having such a problem with them. The whole reason I moved away from Tarot was because of certain symbolism that is, come on, quite frankly, it roots from a Christian culture source. That's just what Tarot is. It's what it's based off of. It was based off of the lifestyle and basically the culture that is heavily influenced by Christian churches, okay? Catholic Church, however you want to say it. That's just the basic truth. It was originally a game that was supposed to reflect certain things going on at the time during the Italian Renaissance. That's what it is. All these extra symbolic spiritual symbolism and a bunch of other things we've added over time. It's lovely. It adds depth and makes it into an even better system to work with, but it is not my path. It is brings up a lot of hesitation in people I read for, which is why I, for a long time, stuck with my Oracle decks. Like I did readings with my Druid Animal Oracle at first, and then I found some really awesome Lenormand decks that I could read in kind of an Oracle / learning the Lenormand fashion. I intuitively read most of all, and then I bring in a lot of what I'm getting hits on of what I'm feeling from the people that I read for. So they're really just a way to kind of help put things in order for me, because I get information out of order when I'm feeling things from people's Auric currents, when I'm feeling direct information from them or the nature spirits, the essences of land, sea, and sky. Or I kind of think of the sea as moving water. Living water gives messages to us, and polluted water is almost dead water, depending on where it's from and how polluted it is in certain situations. There's just different kinds of essences of nature that I feel I work with when I'm connecting with people's currents, and also connecting with what you could kind of think of as the greater intuitive knowledge that kind of floats around us all the time. I feel that nature speaks to us all the time, through the air, through our bodies, through everything physical, everything, everywhere. I guess you could say I'm an animist at heart. A eclectic fae is how I put it, because I mix a very pagan faith system as part of how I do readings and how I live my life. So the major points I wanted to make on this deck are the big trigger ones for me is the two nice things that I feel will really appeal to people and helped me with learning to read with a pip deck is that this pip deck on the minor arcana and all the way through has key terms on the bottom. And I got to see the Hermit, I can't remember he had a really cool video where he showed that he trimmed off the key terms. And I'm thinking at some point, maybe I can do that. Like once I get really comfortable, once I learn to use these, this is just a really good starting place. This is not the only meanings that you can come up with these, of course. These are just a starting place, and I like that. I have a handful of tarot decks that have those on top of all the other symbolism, and I like that because sometimes there's too much on the tarot, and sometimes there's too much words on any kind of oracle. But one key term and using that as a jump off point, I think is enough. If you can remember the systems and work off that, then wonderful. But everybody goes through a blank spot, and I think this is a really great thing. So when I saw this, I was like, dude, I know I always felt like regular pip decks were way too much for me. One, the symbolism on the older ones, the Marcelles, are just, I can't go there. It's just too much trigger effect on me. And two, I thought, oh, well, this is almost like freeing, like an oracle, because even if I'm having a blank moment, I can at least start from, the directions of the symbols, how they're lined up together. I'll get more into that as I talk about the different parts of it. But the fact that they have key terms on here now, on this Oceanic Tarot one, is awesome because I am used to working with that and allowing my intuition to jump off that and go in whatever direction. It's almost like how in an illustrative deck, you use all that symbolism and motion and pictorial scenic stuff going on to be your jumping off points. And I kind of like a verbal jumping off point, or just a one word jumping off point, far better than sentences and advisatory phrases or affirmations. I don't like, I trimmed the affirmation off of my Fairies Messages Oracle or whatever that one was, because it was too much. I could handle the one word on there. I can handle the title in a one word, but don't give me like sentences to read. It's annoying. Lucy Cavendish gets right in that middle ground where enough, but not too much. So, and a few others. So, okay. So another thing I really like is they've themed each suit with an animal, and I love animals. So water is dolphins, earth is tortoises, sea tortoises, swords is sharks, and seahorses are fire. Okay. Or wands are seahorses. And I really like this. These are probably the most detailed, as most pip decks have it, the most detailed and a bit more stuff going on in these than all the other pips. All the other pips just have a static one picture that's through all of them, and then it's the position and how many of the symbol that may give you another clue or hint at stuff. The other thing I really like about this is that there's some minor cards with certain imagery that automatically make you go to one place. They're going to have a heavier one of the meanings visually there in the picture. But with the symbols, I really like the point. I've heard it and I've read it, and it really drove it home. That when you just have the symbols there and maybe the position that they're in, you can go to lots of different points, and allowing your intuitive nature just to really blend with the person you're focusing on, and this just directing you into that, say, bank of those kind of things. So I'm really planning on using numerology as one of the points, and I have a book that I love studying tarot with. This is the one when I ran classes, I would refer to this book to people for intuitive / some studying, but mostly intuitive based readings. I love this. It's a Magical Course of Tarot by Michele Morgan. And I don't really plan on buying a book right away for this, but I have spotted one that I'm thinking about, but I want to kind of look at it first and try working with numerology, the numbers, 1 through 10. And I also got cued in to check out working with the numerology of the major arcana and how you can group them under certain combinations and then group the number associated in the minor arcana to the same ones in the same groupings, and then seeing what that lesson of those groups are and what are the main terms and parts of the journey that you can explore through that. So I thought those two ways would be really great starting point for me. And this book has some of that in here too. And I love that this book is colored. I hate that the Celtic cross is in here, but I really don't like this spread. But I've had some reframing with that through a course I took recently. And now I'm trying to start to think of this spread as the Celtic spiral instead, as you can kind of work your way out and kind of get a spiral formation in a loose way. Because I came from a couple different faiths of Christianity. I have like 4 to 5 different faiths within my family, and I visited them all and even spent some time in some of them. The last two I was heavily involved in was the Mormon, and then the last one was the Assembly of God. Assembly of God is probably one of the best rock and roll churches you'll ever, Christian rock type stuff you'll ever experience. I'm not a Christian anymore, haven't been since my late teens. But that was one of the last churches I ever went to. And the Mormon one was before that. And there was just so many things going on that I just couldn't go there anymore. But one of the things that I really was driven home to me, not in the Assembly of God, but within the Mormon faith, was that the cross was basically a weapon of death. Why would you use the symbol of what killed one of your gods as the symbol of your faith? And then that isn't how they would put it. That's how I think of it. Okay. So if you love your cross, please don't be offended by what I'm saying. Again, I am not even trying to bash Christianity. I think it can be a beautiful faith. I know lots of people use it as a guideline for their life. I personally just had quite a few situations that made certain things about the faith and some of its symbolism be negative triggers for me. So the nice thing about this deck is that having it reframed into a symbol that I truly adore and feel some attachment to, and makes me feel more open to working with the tarot system again. And I'm hoping less stirring up of, oh, it's this card with that look, with that meaning, yada, yada, yada. Just for instance, let's jump to the major arcana and I'll explain what I'm talking about. So like this one has the high priest instead of the Hierophant. I hate the Hierophant. I think you can pretty much think of why. The Hierophant is a symbolic leader, and in some decks, it's someone standing over people burning books. In some decks, the guy just looks like really distant and judgmental, and the whole, system of the hierarchy aspect of the religion and a judgment factor is totally built into it. But when you look at this one, I see more of a shepherd, with the like a sheep shepherd. I love the key term wisdom. And I like that he's like reaching out to you. Like, I want to share my wisdom. I want to help you out. There is an aspect that's more of a caring aspect and not so much of that, what to me is a more structured religious symbol. Okay. So it's there if you go for that, if that's your thing, but the way it's presented is to me a bit more organic, and I just love this depiction of it. And there's some other decks that have reframed the Hierophant into High Priest or other ways too. So this is just, like I said, versus the Tarot of the Mermaids, in which you're seeing a Hierophant underwater. There was just problematic things in that deck. As gorgeous as it is, I love that they changed the back of that one. But when I was looking at this one, I was like, I think this would trigger me a lot less than that other one. Now, the Justice one, about half and half with this one, this can be a little bit of a trigger. But I have the Circle of Life Tarot, and there's a mermaid justice lady in that one. And so when I saw this, I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. I like where this is going. I feel connected to that. I can totally work with that. Sometimes some of the background or something about the person being the judger or whatever. There's something about it that lends to certain hierarchical type stuff that I don't like to associate with. Now, the death card in here, I really like this. I actually don't have a lot of problems with death cards, but I do know some people do. And I just think this is a beautiful representation of death that would be less triggering for other people. And the fact that it even says transformation on the bottom and isn't so focused just on like death, it's like they really, like when I'm reading for people, they really have to pay attention to get the death because it's written so lightly on there. You take in more of the scenic aspect of this. And that's another thing. This is a borderless deck. Non-reversible, but I don't really pick. I actually like that kind of thing. Sometimes it's nice not to have the reversibility because it gives you a clue in your brain if some stuff is going to be challenging for some people here. And there's some stuff to work on and work through before I even flip the cards, which I know is probably the objection. I don't want extra clues before I flip the cards. I've heard it some people say. Okay, so now here is one that is a triggering one for me. This one's called Angel of the Ocean. I believe this is usually temperance in the usual depiction of the Wider Waite or even the Marseille and stuff like that. I like this because I have a winged mermaid. It's more a fairy winged, not so much a feathered winged mermaid, but I don't find these types of mermaids or angel-y / mermaid beings as confrontational to me. I don't have as much of the positive connotation on angels as other people do. I love my Lucy Cavendish angels because they're very down to earth and they feel like they're living down here in the dirt with us, so to speak. They're doing the everyday. I never have been connected to the archangel type stuff. And this just makes me feel like it's a very wise being that's been around for a very long time, a guardian, someone who's trying to help. It says healing and it says angel of the ocean. So if you think of angels as guardians, if you think of them as assistants, if you think of them as healing beings, then this works. It totally works for me. And I don't feel my back going up as much when I see these angel wings on the back of the mermaid because of my own associations with that. Now, I love this one too. This one's temptation as the key term, and the top says the vortex, but I believe this is the devil card. And I like this depiction. I don't really like Christian depicting devil cards because my associations are not the same. I'd rather see a horn god. I'd rather see something connected with temptation, but it isn't just temptation. It is being locked up and not being to clear, maybe not acknowledging or having not realized that you have a way out, that you have a choice of going in this direction of temptation or not. And that even if you were tricked into it, you have the choice whether or not you stay within it. So there's so much more. And I think this is a really cool one. The vortex. I find that interesting as a depiction for the devil card. All right, here we go with, I love this tower. Again, some people find the tower very, very, a frightening card. And yeah, this isn't great, but how many times have we watched Pirates of the Caribbean and the ship going down or doing something really funky? There's a little bit more of an openness with a deck like this to be able to take in the messages without being so threatened by the messages. And I like that. So this one, as a key term, says destruction. So I'm not saying there's definitely darker things in this deck, just like any well-balanced tarot, but I like the reframing of it. I like this depiction of it a lot. Judgment. Now, again, being as an angel / mermaid situation in here, again, all the relevant things are here. I just don't feel as triggered by this imagery in this way as I do in some of the other ones that I try to work with. And a lot of my decks are more, earth spiritualist or alternative friendly or those things are there. So those are the main major arcana trigger cards for me. And I was trying to remember, I guess I need to do a separate video or maybe take more time with this, but there's certain cards in the minor arcana that usually have some pictures that are kind of like, okay, a lot of time they'll show like, is it the Pentacles? 5 of Pentacles has like a scene where they're outside looking in on a church and they're beggars and they're needing assistance and help. Now that depiction definitely shows the meaning of that card, right? But then you're also like dependent on the church for help. I don't like that. I don't want that depiction in my head. I mean, I have it there. I've definitely learned it through the Rider-Waite-Smith system, but do I really need that depiction in my head? Because let me tell you, there's strings attached every time. It's been my experience personally that help you get from that organization has strings attached many times. Not all the time, but many times there are. So I have a triggering thing that goes on, and I don't want my triggers to be involved in somebody else's reading. So finding decks that do not trigger me is a key thing that I want so that I can come to a reading very neutral and open and honest and helpful for those who seek readings with me. All right. So this, again, now it's just a lovely, cool, alternative looking deck. The imagery is awesome. This one I think is really cool because all 4 of the animals in the suits are in the background there, as well as the typical symbols that the magician would use to manifest things. I like some really, typical, there's standard tarot symbolism still built into this. I like the reframing of the Queen of the Ocean. I know some people say that might be a little confusing with the Queen of the suits, different suits, but I like this. Empress and Emperor has connotations of a certain aspect of culture that isn't my everyday here in the US. It may be the history of our European ancestry and some other stuff, but I live in the now, not in the history. And as much as I love history, because I do, when I'm doing a reading for someone, I want something that reflects a bit of the energy of the now. And I know this is like a fantasy style with the mermaid stuff, but to me, mermaids are basically just nature spirits that are representing the wisdom of the waters. Be they oceanic or the undines. I really like the King of the Ocean as well. I wish he had a trident instead of like a wand type staff or something, but it's still beautiful. It still gets the message across. Very strong looking King of the Ocean. So that's renamed. The Chariot is typical, but the look of it is a mix of non-standard and standard, the light versus dark horse, so to speak, seahorse in this case, when instead of something with wheels, you have a shell acting as the chariot and being pulled across or through the water. I think that's a really neat. But this one has the power trident, and so there may be an aspect of the power to help keep things in check and focus to help make the progress move forward. Awesome symbolism there. I love the Hermit in here with the jellies, because the jellies are just kind of floating there. They don't really swim in any direction. They're just allowing the motion in the ocean of the waves to move them wherever they need to be, right? And this hermit is in the moment of contemplation. So I also love that this is an inclusive race deck. There's not all kinds of body types, but there is all kinds, many kinds, I should say, of races. And I love that aspect. That was one of the other reasons that I finally decided on this deck. This is the Wheel of Fortune, and it is gorgeous. I just love this. It talks about destiny as the key term, so that's awesome. I love this. I love the strength because it talks about in the book how he is controlling the flow of how quickly these fish get out of the net, so he is not overwhelmed by them. So this is the strength card and stability. So he's creating, a more controlled situation and yet still helping them and showing his strength through his ability there. The Hanged Man is an interesting one in this one, considering they're in water, why he's hanging, but the symbolism of what it should be is there. So limbo, I also thought that was an interesting term for this one. And I do like the picture in general. A star. It says hope, very appropriate. I love that they put seals on here because to me, the seals are like the dogs of the ocean. because they bark. How often do you hear they call the seals' vocalizations barking, and they call the baby seals pups? So why not use seals for a symbol of the moon and a replacement for dogs? Makes sense to me. I love the Aurora Borealis shimmer that's in the sky around the moon. Oh, it's just lovely. It's probably another thing that influenced me to pick this deck. And when I first saw this deck, I thought, no, it was before I was really considering the pips. I was already having hard enough time reconnecting to tarot in general. So I really like that they don't have a baby with the sun. It always bothered me. It always bothered me when I see a sun card with a baby on the back of a horse. I always think, oh my God, that's so dangerous. Babies have no balance. They just fall off and break its neck. I know there's a few other, like Kelly from the Truth and Story doesn't like them either. And she actually voiced why I didn't like it. I never fully voiced it before or even fully thought of why it made me uncomfortable. And then I realized it was because a baby wouldn't be riding a freaking horse by itself. No way. So I like this. This is awesome. And the key term on there is happiness. And to me, the sun card is a yes card. There's some other stuff too, of course. And then we have the world. And I actually really like this. I like this. It says regeneration. And to me, the greenish blue aspect and the glowing there is like he's being recharged. And I like that the circle that tends to be on the world, like either because they're showing an earth or they're showing like a ring, a reef or something like that. You wouldn't see a reef unless somehow seaweed became a reef. So having a swirling motion of fish is a good replacement for some of the typical shapes and symbolisms that you might see in a world card. So I thought that was really cool. So I'm just saying, I really like that this major arcana in this Oceanic Tarot does not trigger me as quickly or as heavily as some tarot decks do. Because I really have to like work myself into a certain space not to bring that crap into somebody else's reading. As a reader, you're supposed to be able to be neutral and in the moment for really connecting with the symbolism for the person you're reading for. And I think that's really important. If you can't be that sounding board, that reflective mirror without adding too much of your own shit, then you shouldn't be reading. I mean, yeah, you bring your own philosophies of life and certain things like that, but sometimes people are just wanting to know what you sense and they don't want to get your 2 or 3 cents from your own spiritual practice. I totally get that. I don't like it when people proselyte at me, and I wouldn't want anybody shedding their religion on me during my reading. So, if they're open to my perspective or they have a similar spiritual background than I do, or maybe they're a seeker, explorer of spiritual paths, I'll share. But if they just want a message and they want to know about their situation, then I want to easily be able to get to the message. Okay. So here's the other reason. I mentioned it a little bit before in the major section. They are inclusive of different races. Now, there's not a lot of different body types, like fat people versus really skinny people, short people, all that kind of stuff. But there is some racial mixing here. So the suit of swords, I'm actually not sure which race this is, but it's like a certain coloring here, dark-haired, almost olive skin look. The other thing is, and this is huge, boobalicious babes gone. Like definitely lovely women, lovely forms, but no booby and nipple-ish crap going on. I can't have that when I'm doing booth events. So a lot of times when I want to bring my mermaids, I can't unless it's one of my other decks that has coverage in those things, because I cannot tell you how often I'll get a father, a grandmother, a mother who has some kids with them and they want to be able to get a reading with a deck like that, but then they don't want their kids to be seeing stuff. Or, there's a little bit of an immaturity level that goes on with that. And then instead of being totally focused on the reading, we have giggling of little kids about the boobies on the page. It's a bit distracting. So the fact that they have just strips of clothing or cloth, or maybe even, whatever it is, those are 2 things. The inclusivity of about 4 races here, but some of them look like they could just like, dark-haired, kind of olive tone skin. If you know which race or cultural people this is, please let me know in the comments. I would so appreciate that. It isn't stated actually, I'm not sure, but I don't think it's actually stated in the book. And I love, the book is fully colored. I'll get a little bit into that. This book's been out since 2002, though. And if you want a thorough walkthrough, like an actual walkthrough every card, please look for the other videos that are out there because they're great. And I just didn't feel like, since this wasn't an exactly new deck, that I needed to do a full walkthrough. I will if you want. I can be quiet and just flip through it. But there's some already out there. So like this one, yeah, they don't say what races they are. But if you look at them, you can tell. Okay, let me show you the other ones that I'm very sure, I'm very sure I know which one. So here's like European pale Caucasians. You might even say this is Southern European, maybe even, you know, the places where the Israel people are, or, you know, the Southern European people of the Mediterranean have coloring like this, okay? Or maybe dark looking Irish people. But to me, I usually associate Irish people with kind of paler people. So here's some Caucasian people. All right. You got the King of Water. And I love this like cloak / cape piece on him. The Queen, oh, just is such a lovely top on her, and yet shows such a lovely figure as well, without the boobylicious stuff, but lovely lady. The Knight shows a young man. So there's some loveliness for us, right? And then we have a Page of Cups. And again, down here we have Imagination and key terms, again, on all the cards, from Major, Court to Minor Arcana key terms. All right, so Caucasian people on the water cards. I'm not sure who the Pentacle card. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure who the swords are, but if you know, please share with me who you think they might represent. But I do feel it's still inclusive. And Asian, I get an impression of Asian people in this one. So like Chinese, Thailand, Japan, people like that represented here. And I love that the sea tortoise is represented as one of the animals of the sea. Here's the King. This was the Page. It's a little out of order because I just grabbed them. I like the key terms too. The King, he has a wrap, a shorter one on this one. And I just really like, they did so well in the kind of trim and anglage of the face to really give that, and the eyes. I'm sorry if it's a little blurry. This is just my regular HD camera on my laptop. I usually add my Logitech, but I just couldn't find it. I know it's around here somewhere. Okay. And I love this. See her? She is gorgeous. I just love. My sister's part Japanese, and I almost had a Thai sister-in-law. And so I really just love the Asian people and their bone structure and just their look in general. It's so beautiful. So I was very happy to see this. When I saw this, I was just like, yes. Because the one thing that I didn't like about, if I'm remembering correctly with the Tarot of the Mermaids, is that they all looked white. They were all varying shades of white people. And I'm just like, really? So this is the seahorse and the wands, and we have the African descent. For me in the US, I would think African American, but I know that there's far more people with this kind of coloring and bone structure and all that. So I'm just going to say African descent people. Okay. You can add whatever term you like, wherever you see this race. That's awesome to me. I love it. I think they're gorgeous. I love the colors and tones, and very recognizable. And the only reason I think they look paler is because I think that they're doing rays. And I notice that everybody's kind of glowing on the court cards. And I think that's just a way to show shimmer and highlight the people in the picture to make them the focus of the picture. But that also lends to having them slightly paler skin, even though this is the darkest color in the sets of court cards. And I think they're gorgeous. And again, I love that they have tops of clothing, wraps covering their chest or upper bodies. So lovely and awesome key terms. So key things about this deck that made me pick it. One, the key terms at the bottom. will help with learning. Even if you're a beginner, I feel that this would be a good, great, fantastic beginner deck. If you're not trying to learn specifically the Michele's, really old method of divination with tarot. Sorry, I had to move my legs around. Let me tip this for you a little. And I love that this is racially inclusive of at least 4 different races, if not more, which can cover many different people among the world and should be able to somewhat fit with this variety. I love that the major arcana has a certain look and feel of some troubling cards for me. And I have to admit, some people I read for, they don't, not everybody deals well with the meanings and symbolism of the Christian faiths. And more people have had a raw deal. And that is not to say that everything about Christianity is wrong or whatever. It is not. I know I've met lots and lots of lovely Christian people. And for some people, it is an awesome guiding force in their life and has added a lot of structure, healing, and peace to them. But in my case, it has not been so. And I totally admit that this is a trigger issue for me. I really like the aces in this deck too. That was one thing. I love that the suits are in a study, each have their own animal, which is going to lead me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. I also love the colors and tones that they picked for this deck is just gorgeous. I love the palette. I love that it really jives for me. And I've already done a few readings with this. I'm trying to remember. There was something else I was going to talk about that I realized that I've forgotten to talk about. And this has been brought up in an article, 1 or 2 articles that I read, and then in one video that I read. And I'm afraid I can't remember whose video it was. It may have been Hermit's, or there was a woman. I think, I can't remember her name right now. I'll try to maybe add it somewhere if I remember. But they both had a really great point, and that was, now I'm losing my focus. Okay, let me do it the one, and then I'll try to talk about it. It'll pop in my head. It always happens that way. So I like that the freedom to be able to trigger things with your imagination without having certain set illustrations on the cards, so that, yes, that can help you as a starting point, but it also can lock you into certain set meanings and definitions of cards. Like, for instance, a very simple one would be 3 of Swords. What do you think automatically? Well, the key term they have on 3 of Swords is, is heartbreak. But for me, it's like, it can be breakup. It can be a bruising situation. Someone who's literally gone through surgery and had heart surgery, something like that. This one says heartache, actually. There you go. That's what it is. There's different certain symbolism, and it's mental stress, and it isn't always romantic, although we do tend to associate a heart pierced with 3 swords with this card, mostly due to the wider Smith meaning and imagery that you see often with this card. Now, is more to this. The nice thing in the book that this came with is that they give you a variety of key terms that go with it. And thus, there was a couple I didn't even know of. I was like, oh, really? That is intriguing. I like that. So I'm really hoping to expand my meanings and inclusiveness in what these cards can cover, that I feel maybe I have been limited a little bit by, from having those illustrative pictures. Before, I was a total Wider Smith. That's where I started out. I will still work with my cards, but I find I mostly do tarot for myself. I don't really read my other tarot decks too often for anybody else, unless something about their question or their energy pulls me to a certain deck to read for that particular person. Otherwise, most of my decks are just for me when it comes to my tarot decks. It's just how it's been. Okay. The other thing is I really liked that they pointed out, and I noticed that depending on the number, there's certain set ways, like usually the water and say the cups and the pentacles or disc, whatever they are, the water and earth spread cards have similar lineup of the symbols. So the discs on top of each other, the cups on top of each other, and a similar thing. In each suit, there are some that are the same, and then there are some that variants. Like, okay, but with the wands and swords, see the swords are crossing and the wands are in straight. Two totally different ways to look at it, adding to the meanings of this, okay? Even though we don't have scenes to work with, there still is some patterns and lineups going on, and that was one of the things that they pointed out in their articles in the 1 or 2 videos I saw, and I thought, oh, I could definitely use that. Okay, another example of that, okay, set symmetry patterns going on there, and then a little bit of a difference here. Now this, again, here we go again, lined up, crossing, okay? So I really like that. I think it can be worked with. I agree with that. Here's 4 and 4, okay? And again, the water and earth and the fire and air tend to have similar patterns. And then, but a few of them change up. A few of them change up. 5, pretty simple. Yeah. Almost like looking at dice. And it reminded me that there are some decks out there that are major arcana and court cards, and then they have dice instead for showing the minor arcana representations without having cards doing the representation. So they limit how many cards you work with and have the dice replacing the minor arcana cards. And I thought that I finally understood what that was about when I was looking at some of the symbolism in these and thinking about those at the same time. It would be bringing it up in my head. I've also been watching more D&D, and so I think something kind of lined up in my head. And I, again, really love the look of this. It's so inviting to me, and I've already done some really cool. Okay, so here's going into the 6s. Okay, that was 5s going to the 6s. See how the patterns have changed a little bit? There's some similarity, and then like this one's more, the symbols move down and in, and having the 4 corners. This is, the 4 corners are still there with the water, but instead of being in the middle like the earth, they've moved out. So tucking in, moving out. So affecting how you could see the differences in the meanings here. I think for once the swords are in sync in showing the same pattern, whereas in this case the earth and the swords and wands were in sync and showing similar patterns in the symbolism, but the earth and water, the cups and pentacles, were showing almost the same, but then a couple movements showing differences. And I liked that. I'm like, I know I can work with that. I just need to get a bit outside the box. Okay, standard patterns sharing between them again. And then another standard pattern between the two of them. So there are, some stuff that's not totally following the pattern, but there is some of it there. So here's the different one. Making sure I'm on the, yeah, both are 8s, but in this case, we have structure on the outside with hidden emotions there. And then we have structure on bottom and top rather than on the sides with inner stuff going on there. So yeah, I feel that leans into if you know, Marcella, you can share how there are similarities and difference between the different pip decks, but I do not intend to go that old school. I know there's too much certain associations going on with certain cultural norms that I am not going to. Okay, it's just not going to work for me. Similar, yep, exact or the same, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, not too many things going there. Okay, and then I think these last 2 are the same. Okay, so there are some differences, and they can definitely be used. Some same things but acknowledging that earth and water have certain similar patterns. Fire and air have certain similar patterns. Okay, so being able to use that numerology, I'm going to combine in there. There was a really cool method of grouping based off of the majors numerology, which I did a little shortcut cheat sheet so I could divide the deck up into these groups of, say, it's like the Fool, the Magician with the aces, and then so on through the rest of the major arcana, and then having certain ones, not including the court cards. That's going to be something separate. I realized that I needed to study court cards I've had my ways of dealing with it. And then one other thing came into my attention when I was trying to figure out how am I going to study this without buying another book or whatever for a little bit here, because I'm trying to save up. I have to buy my own assessment testing things because I homeschool. And so I don't want my kids to do the other testing because my youngest son does not have the writing skill to handle that testing. So we are working through another program to make sure he gets his assessments without having the testing anxiety and stress, but still take care of his growth and needs. And also my older boy has a bit of stress, test anxiety as well. So we're doing assessment-based end of the year things that we need to take care of things, but I need to save up just a little bit more money to be able to pay for that. So one of the things that I did was looking at a couple of books that I got, and one I mentioned was the Magical Course in Tarot. It is more of an intuitive style with a very simplistic section in, I wouldn't say simplistic, a very straightforward, quick way to learn some really basic methods to get you started and then allow your intuition to bounce off that. And this is partially what when I used to teach classes, this is what I introduced really, really newbies to. But I still think it's a really good base to come from. In part 1, chapter 6, I believe, it talks, they call this chapter The Language of Secrets and Symbols, Discovering the Essential Energies of the Cards. That's what I'm going to work with for a bit here with connecting with this Pip style deck. And the next one I plan to get is the Tarot of the, is it Familiars Tarot or Tarot Familiars? I loved the look. I love the dark tones, and I love working with animal decks. So I just thought, okay, that's where I need to go. And I'm kind of looking around because I really don't want to do, like I said, the Marseillais style. I think they're gorgeous. I love that they're old world, all that awesome stuff that they are. But again, too much triggering for me with certain symbolism that are in those decks when it comes to the major arcana specifically, not so much the pips. So I just don't want to go there. But this book has some really awesome it's a major arcana, at least 3 different word meanings there for each card. I even wrote in a note in here, which I needed because I was like, wait a second, what the hell? My 8 is something, my 11 is something else. And then I happened to look through this book, and in some decks they're flipped, and that helped me figure out the numerological problem I was having of why strength isn't on this number card. And this is, I think it was like, justice was on the card that should have been strength or something like that. So that got straightened out. Thank goodness. Thought I was losing my mind for a minute there. And then there's a nice section on the 4 suits and some key terms and emotions and stuff connected to those. There's a great section on Ace through 10. It even says you can consult or might consult a numerology book for more in-depth exploration of the numbers involved in the minor pips. This suggests it, and I already had this somewhere, so I was like, okay, awesome. When I've had this paper that floats, and this as kind of a bookmark, but also as part of this chapter. When I was doing Waking the Wild Spirit, was one of my major client working decks for a few years before I had my kids, and I wrote down some of the key terms and meanings from that book and put it in here because I loved the added meanings, and I even wrote 1 or 2 key terms that wasn't on here. I think I also would take this out and have this as a check sheet, kind of like a quick thing. If I drew blanks, I could just refer to it really quick. But then when I stopped using that deck, I'm pretty sure I just popped it back in here, so I would have an easy way to resource a couple cool numerology-based quick meanings. And then they have a short thing on court cards and some key terms to go with that. But I do believe these are just starting points. And I would encourage you to find a more in-depth book on court cards because it is a complicated thing. And I know that I mostly depend on my intuition when it comes to court cards and a few key terms and stuff. So I feel like I really need to get better educated on court cards. So I am really excited. Oh, hello, Tommy. Hi. I also got this really cool book called WTF is the Tarot. And I like this book because I think I might be able to use it a little bit with this one, even though this I feel is working a little bit more with the wider weight Smith system. But if you look in this book, there's very little visual depictions. And the one thing I already got some really cool tips on from this book is that I never had a solid system of figuring out timing in readings. And I think it's just because I kind of never learned the idea of certain suits covering certain time periods. This book very clearly, as one of the first things you learn about the minor suits, on the first, like over the ace of the suits, or when it starts going into the suits, I'm trying to get to it. It's like major arcana. Hold on. Says like, okay, here's the suit of wands. It literally says, okay, fire, spring, dawn, days. Okay. Now, I don't know how I missed this before, but I have never seen something that said spring, dawn, days, and then fire or, wands or whatever. I always wondered how people were getting specific times and days. And this is the clearest I have ever seen it anywhere. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I didn't really focus on timing readings, but I'm working on one of the sites that I work on as an independent contractor. People are really concerned with when is this going to happen? And usually I go by my intuition. Usually I can tell them sooner rather than later. Usually I can say, well, it feels like it's going to be during a warm time. It feels like it's fairly soon, those kind of things. I'm not really specific enough, and I know that. But sometimes I will get some kind of impression that helps lead them go, oh, okay, I know that event's coming up here. And I get specific things like, okay, it feels like it's going to be before this birthday, feels like it's before or after your trip, but it feels like it's before. I usually get like this happens, that happens, and that happens. But if I can learn a system that actually, I'm going to see if it actually works for me and is accurate of that the different suits cover, wands covers days. I think they said water covers months, and I think it was earth covers years, and swords covers weeks. So that I was like, oh my God, why had I never heard anything like this before? Now I have, and I'm looking forward to using it. So I'm starting off with the Oceanic Tarot as my first Pip deck. So I keep saying pick. I think it's from Willow, and they kept calling it the miniature people picks. But I'm starting with the Oceanic Tarot. I don't really, like I said, intend to study the Marseillais. I think that's going to be too much of a trigger for me when it comes to my old spiritual past that I was raised within, and how much negativity I had in that. Again, I am not dogging on Christianity. I'm just saying, for me, there are certain triggers. And when I'm doing readings, I don't want decks that trigger me to a negative space that may not have the same connotations for everybody else when it comes to those kind of symbolism and faiths. I do know that there are others like me who have issues with certain symbolism. But I still feel that they're really great symbols. Like, to me, the death card is never about death. It's actually about transformation, and maybe something's coming to an end. To me, the Ten of Swords has a more heavy energy of death than the Major Arcana's death card. If I got the death card with the Ten of Swords and maybe even a couple of other cards with it, then I would be like, ooh, serious illness, possible death. A lot of things could be happening, but I most likely reframe the reading in a way that I want them to go to the doctor. I'd want them to be very careful. Those kind of things, warn them that there could be some risk, but I would not tell someone that they're going to die. But I would say there may be someone near them that maybe go through something dangerous, or whatever the energies and the symbolism is telling me, I will be truthful about. But personally, I have known when certain things were going to happen based off of certain symbolism, and I take that as it is, and I take precautions where needed when I see those things. I love how this deck symbolizes it. As important, but not quite as triggery. And so you can still get the rest of the message without being in a panic, and how you present it is also another thing. As a reader, if you've been reading for a while, you'll know that. So, I'm really happy that I got this deck. And my next one, I'm planning, if I'm getting any other tarot, I'm planning on getting the Tarot of the Familiars, or is it Familiar Tarot, something like that. Tarot Familiars. I gotta look at it. Because it is a pip deck. I've seen Kelly in the Truths and Stories thorough walkthrough, and she talks about details so well. I don't know if she did one on this deck, but if she did, it's probably awesome. But again, I didn't walk through. Did I end up walking through all the cards? Maybe I did. But I wanted to explain to you why I picked this one over the other, why I am willing to go and explore the Pip Decks, because I'm having such a hard time. This whole year, I've been trying to reconnect with my tarot decks, and the only ones I can really use are the ones that are very oracle leaning in their structure. All the other ones, I'm having this really stop-go effect, and unless the person I'm reading for, somehow their energy really drives with one of my tarot decks, I just have not been playing with my decks as much. Totally fine with my oracles, totally involved in different seasons with different oracles that I tend to work with. Like my beautiful creatures, I love it, but I have to work with it as an oracle type system because there is, even in that one, certain symbolism, including the cross and some ways that they're showing certain cards in that is a little triggery for me. So yeah, I'm trying to make that peace with that and trying to move beyond that. And I'm thinking maybe working with pip decks could be helpful for that, as long as they're not coming from too far in cultural past, which is heavily influenced by, certain cultural standards and ways of living that was held within the old European areas. So, yeah, I'm not going to repeat myself anymore if I have been. Thank you for bearing with me and taking a peek at this video. As if you have any suggestions for other decks that are picks without being necessarily Marcella's traditional or whatever, and if you would be happy to point out what aspects of this are stemming from older traditions and what are just, they're just pip decks. And I would really appreciate anyone, if you accidentally get a pip deck and you just don't like the fact that the minor arcana are not illustrated like most wider weight decks, don't give it a negative review because it isn't totally illustrative. Please keep in mind that it may be a pip deck and it was done on purpose because there are people who like pip decks. And I always get irritated when I see negative reviews just based on that, when they obviously don't understand that there is another system of tarot. Really irritates me because even when I gave reviews, even if I accidentally got a pip deck, I would never give a bad review for that because I did understand that it might be coming from a different system I just didn't know enough about yet. And so I would never give a bad review just because I don't understand a system. And that seems to be what's going on with some of these bad reviews for certain decks. I mean, if the card stock sucks, or you really don't like the artwork, or maybe they're missing certain aspects that are supposed to be in the cards, or maybe it's an art piece deck, an artist did it, but they didn't really know tarot that well, and then they did that, then yeah, sure, I can understand reviews not being so great on decks like that. But if you're giving bad reviews on pip decks just because you wanted them to make an illustrative pip inclusive deck, then that's you not getting what you want. That does not mean that the deck isn't great. And Tarot the Familiars and I feel like the Oceanic Tarot is those kind of decks. So yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for showing up and watching. Please give a thumbs up, thumbs down, or maybe even some comments on the subject or suggestions for how to present this kind of stuff. Any inclusive insights and maybe even recommendations of decks of a similar style to this, I would be very interested in. And I will try to show a bit of my adventure on this new direction with studying tarot. I will make it much shorter on videos form. Okay. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.